Hello,
Hello,
guys.
hello.
Welcome to this new edition of Mind Podcast. This is Aadit Kapadia coming to you on yet another week with a fascinating discussion. I've been very happy with the last few weeks. I'm always happy to bring you different episodes, but the last few weeks have been particularly, fantastic because we've gone from politics to culture to history, and music. We've covered so many topics, and today is a completely different topic we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about books, we are going to talk about positive stories, and we're going to talk about a fascinating new book that has come up called Good News India. And with me I have the author of the book, the very young and energetic D V Sridharan ji, and I have the publisher of the book from Bloomsbury, India. I have Praveen Tiwary. So welcome, you guys to this Mind podcast. And I'm so glad you guys could make the time to join us. And our readers are fascinated to know, and readers and listeners, I should say, because I forget, like when it comes to podcasts and videos, the listeners and viewers come even, before the readers when it comes. But let's get into, before we get into the discussion of all this, DVG, I want to first come to you, right? You've published a lot of these stories on your website. You've talked about this. You're a marine engineer by profession. As I was telling before, I have a
Yeah.
very special affinity for that because I'm an engineer myself, so there's
Uh,
always one for the team. I have to tell you, what motivated you to write this book? And what is the background of collecting these stories?
yeah. Before I get there, Adit, thank you for having me here. And let me confess to a stage fright. You see, I'm not quite used to being in a video show. So, just to recover from it, let me try this first. Let me offer a round of thanks. Praveen Tiwary, to publish a debut author, unknown person, 79 years old. You took a big chance publishing me. I hope the chance you took pays off as a publisher. And I'm very grateful that I was published by you. And I'm seeing you for the first time, and I like the interactions that I had throughout. I learned the craft of publishing from an insider. Thank you very much. And Adit, you're a legend and you're a star. And I can refer to you. I know the spell you cast on North American Indians of people of Indian origins. You and of course I remember from the days Sunanda Vasish used to be there. And Pramod Kumar Buravalli is a person I had the good fortune to meet once.
Yeah, yeah.
So you guys run a game show with such bravery and doggedness. So
Thank you, thank you.
that done, I'm getting over my nervousness about being on the show and talking. So you asked me what took me to Good News India. It's a long thing. It's part of my prologue. I have an extended prologue that I wrote there. And just for the sake of those who haven't had a look at the book, this is the book that Praveen has so lovingly produced for me. It's Good News India. And I decided the stories that I have written, that are anthologized there are 25 of the 100 stories, major stories I wrote at goodnewsindia.com starting in 2000. And I ran it for 6 years. And my epilogue in the book says why I stopped Good News India and I went on to do the work I'm doing now, the environmental restoration. That can keep. But the story of how I came to writing Good News India is worth telling. I hope I don't take too much time to
No,
do
no,
it.
please.
I was a marine engineer. I loved my life at sea. And one of the nice things that my father invested in me when I was young in our family, he forbade playing cards in the house, you see. So none of us learned how to play cards. So this turned out to be a big boon when I was at sea. When, after we had our dinner in the evening, um, which was over by about 6 o'clock, everyone went on to play cards, and I could play cards. So luckily, I used to love books, so I used to write, read, and I'm a latecomer to English. I went to Tamil medium school till I learned to speak English at the age of 15. I began to read it at 12, but I didn't have the confidence to speak till I was 15. But I fell head over heels in love with the language, and I always enjoyed the English language. So I used to read mostly Anglo-Saxon authors, English authors of my generation. We used to read Galsworthy and Auden, and Evelyn Waugh was my favorite, and Asia Cronin and people like that. Galsworthy, stuff like that,
Yeah.
classical kind of that kind of English. I used to be
Old, it's
fascinated.
an old world
Somerset
English
Maugham.
literature of
Yeah, old
authors.
world. Today it'll be ancient, I suppose, but I'm glad.
No, no, no. Today it's more appreciated than you think it is.
Yeah. I quite enjoy being an ancient person walking the world. So I quite enjoy that. So I used to like those stylists of those days, Galsworthy, Forsyth Saga, and stuff like that. Somerset Maugham, not to forget Somerset Maugham. Anyway, so I always had this, when you read long and you have not written, I had not written anything, even just a passing diary, you always have this longing to express yourself that just sort of builds up. And it never got an opportunity until I came ashore, and for a reason, I chose a life of solitariness outside Chennai, and I lived by myself a certain number of years. And I looked around and I discovered how alienated I had become from India because I had gone away for so long. I traveled and saw the world before I ever got to see anywhere like that of India. I had not seen India as much. So I had become thinking, I began much to my thing. I stopped thinking in Tamil and thinking in English, which is not a proud thing now. But that's the way it happened. So when I was looking for a thing, the world around me struck me. It was a time when Naipaul used to be the phase that he hated India. You know, he wrote that wounded civilization and began to see India in the perspective. But then we had Nirad Chaudhary, you know, that the Bengali who felt terribly sorry for himself for not having been born an Englishman. So he
Yeah.
behaved and lived like an Englishman. He wrote that Continent of Circe. It is all bad news, terrible. India was painted. And times were hard.
Yeah.
And I used to bring grains from overseas for, as they used to say, the starving millions of India. I didn't enjoy being told that when I was there. So I was not very proud of India, saddened. I was a proud Indian, but saddened that it should be. So I wanted to know if it was all that terrible. So that's how I decided to take a look. And how I did that is another story, but I'll break here. That's what triggered me. I wanted to discover the Indianness in me. And that led me to many, many people. Over the next 3 years, 6 years, I drove myself around, and sometimes by train and buses, and went around meeting people who became my heroes, who still are my favorite heroes. They inspired me to my subsequent life. So I hope I have addressed the question you asked me.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, because
I caution you, I'm long-winded.
no, that's the best part about the podcast is there is nothing, there is no conversation that is out of bounds, and it's a conversation between friends, right? So it's there is no time, nothing. We're just sitting, and as I joke, it's a conversation over chai, you know. So
All right. Okay.
no, but I'm glad. It's interesting that you brought in the because mind makers, we do talk to a lot of Indians who are based outside India, and a lot of them have the same concerns because more people over here might have read Chaudhary and Naipaul and so forth and form their perspectives from what they have read from here, rather than actually going to India and reading Indian authors whose perspective comes from the ground and not from 5 visits to India in the 90s, right? So, before I come to that, I want to have a question for Praveen ji, and I want to ask him that in these times of we are living in a 24/7 news cycle. We're talking about where books about history, books about politics, and them take precedence over other things, right? What, as a publishing house, what drew you to this story, right? And what was that perspective, what is that backstory from your end?
First of all, Adit, thank you so much. for this organizing this podcast,
Hmm.
because this will, okay. Let me just first of all, answer this, that why, what exactly, made us
Hmm.
to decided to move ahead with this subject, because uh, I think when Dimple ji reached out to us and she pitched this idea,
Hmm.
uh, and especially, before that, I wasn't aware about DVG's, that website which he
Hmm.
used to have.
Hmm. Hmm.
So he said that, Praveen, before going through the book proposal, I want you to just go through that website and
Hmm.
go through those stories first. I
Hmm.
went and I just started reading those
Hmm.
stories. And then those stories actually, I found that somehow I felt that, these are the real heroes. These are the people who have, brought change at the ground level,
Hmm.
which hardly people know. Whether any media or the local media also, you don't find that these people, they don't get coverage, they don't get known, and even, I think they don't actually look for, to be known, or get some sort
Hmm.
of, acknowledgement for what all they are contributing to society.
Right.
So I
Right.
think this was something, after reading those stories, that has made me, triggered, that I think this is something which would be different, because books were there,
Hmm.
on this particular lines, but the kind of depth which DVGs has brought, and the
Hmm.
variety, I
Hmm.
think those 25 stories, if you see the kind of variety which he has chosen, I think that was phenomenal.
Hmm.
So that was, and then we thought, this is something which would be read not only by a section of society, or
Hmm.
not by a age group. Like when you publish, say, a non-fiction, say a political non-fiction, so then we know that, okay, this will be read by, say, age group of, say, 20, 25, or 35, or something
Hmm.
like that. I think this is a book which can be, which can be targeted to even a school students. Every person
Yes.
who is reading, who
Hmm.
has started reading, he is eligible. He would find interest in all those stories which DVG's book features.
So I'll tell you something, and I'm coming to DVG now about this. That when I was growing up, and I went to school in Ahmedabad, and I moved here in my first year of college. But one of the interesting things we always had in English textbooks was we had chapters of books. I That's how I read Mulk Rajanand, or even Tagore, some stories, even some of the Satyajit Ray stories would be translated to English, and we use that. So it almost it that it took me back, like when I was going through this book, DVG, that where we had chapters of fascinating stories. So stories within stories, or stories within a book. And you talked about environment and things like that, right? So one of the stories I always was very fascinating, where you said the Bishnois were the world's first earliest environmental activists, right? So I want you to take you to that. So that is actually a story about India, a very Indic story in a very contemporary sense. Like environmental activism, the term has only started gaining precedence in the last 20-25 years, right? And probably when you were writing these stories on your blog, right, it wasn't as much in India as it is right now, right? So
Yeah.
if you could tell our listeners or viewers about that story, and how you contemporized it, how would you would contemporize it to the audience today?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about it, because today, for me, the primary passion is the environment.
Yeah.
That's a good news India stories led me to that. But before you go there, I want to address what uh, Praveen said. I think, if I may so immodestly say so, my stories will appeal to a wide section of people. And Adit, I wanted to share this fact.
Hmm.
When my website broke out in
Hmm.
2000 and 2001, the
Hmm.
greatest response was from North America, among
Lovely. I did.
NRIs, young students. And those were the days when Google was a funny name that was not yet born. Nobody knew Google. And I used to Alta Vista with the champ, the thing,
Hmm.
the search
Hmm.
engine.
Hmm. Hmm.
It just took off. And when I
Yeah.
finished at the end of it, no publicity. I never publicized. I never sought any publicity. I never took any donation. I had 6,000 people in the mailing list, and I would say half of them were from overseas who were
Yeah.
dying to learn about something redeeming about India. This is exactly the way I would like to put it. It was so rubbished and so rubbished. I mean, the facts also supported the reasons for being rubbished because as politics was terrible, our food shortages were terrible. There were bad things. Our population, public health, it's all vastly terrible. But you never want your homeland to be hurt. You might come from the poorest part of Africa, but you still love your land. So this struck a chord with people in North America. Even now, I get people from North America, old students, old readers of Good News India say, "Oh, I'm glad it's been published. I'm glad that it's coming out. I used to be a regular reader." I keep meeting people like that. So that's a great thing. To come back to your story, see, there was a transformation in me as I wrote the stories more and more. First of all, I began with stories about people who added value to India as an idea, India as a nation. Whoever added value to it, he could have done anything. He could have been a school teacher teaching something or an orphanage looking after. I did all those stories. But as I went along, I found that I was getting drawn to stories that was rooted in the soil. People who did something about conservation. If we, I mean, I'm not very well read in our Itihasa and Puranas, but now I know enough to know that it's one of the few cultures, civilizations that is rooted in the Panchamabhuta, the five spirits, which is nothing but our elements. The Western society has four elements. We have the fifth. We have the Akash. Not many people notice this. It's the Akash that makes it universal. The four elements exist only on the earth. It is the Akash that makes it universal. Otherwise, it's only the earth, the planet. Our ancestors really clued on to that. They just based all our stories, all our lessons, all our worship, all of their religion on the basis of the environmental worship. And now these Bishnois are not very ancient. They're only about, say, 300-400 years ago. And you see, they became environmental worshippers because the land that they got to live on was so terrible that no one can. I've been there around Jodhpur. It is. I spent a whole day meeting them, speaking to the Bishnois. These people, it's a hardscrabble land, as they call it in America. John Steinbeck would have called it a hardscrabble land, where you can't eke a living. It's terrible to make a living. They live there in health, in the prosperity as they understand, and in total contentment. And that made me understand that happiness comes only when you make the connection with the soil and the environment. And I always have this is my original saying that I tire people who ask me, your dissatisfaction is directly proportional to the distance you've gone from the land.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. And that's something I believe now. And my struggle is to close that gap. Close that gap. With each step closer and diminishment of that gap, you will discover your happiness was added. And the Bishnois are the happiest people. And one of the illustrations that I chosen in the book that you see is a woman suckling a deer.
Yeah.
She has her own child on one breast, and on the other, she is suckling a deer. So that's how completely integrated with the environment they are.
When we talk about being one with nature, right? That is being one with nature, where even apart. Yeah, sorry, sir.
No, one with nature, I think, is it's a goal that cannot be attained like perfect zero, no, -273.
No, but I'm saying they are probably the closest that you get.
Yeah, I
compared
think,
to the others.
I just say you try and close the distance as well as you can. Grow a flower or appreciate a flower or pick up some soil and smell it and go and watch a cow and pet it. All this is coming closer to the soil. And so most of my stories were about heroes who restored the environment, did something about the environment. I have some, I mean, if you start me, I can talk all night about all my stories, I recall them,
No,
what
so
made them, but
yeah,
I'll stop there. So
no,
this
no.
is
So
the
yeah,
Bishnoi.
yeah. Sorry, go on. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The modern day environmentalism that I see in
Hmm,
the street, I have a
hmm.
bone to pick with it. It's just protest, protest, protest. I don't listen to anybody's protest unless he shows me what he has done. You
Yeah.
know, do something and come and talk. So this I have no patience with. But Bishnois are the people who live what they practice. Bishnoi is 29 rules. Bishnau. That's where
Hmm,
the name comes from. Bishnau is Bishnau.
hmm, hmm,
Bishnoi. So 29 rules their guru gave them. And every one of them roots them on the soil.
absolutely.
So
So
that is the
yeah,
Bishnoi.
and and I'm coming to Pravinji on Praveen on one of the questions. But one interesting thing is your response to that is exactly what I have, and that's a very, I always joke, that's a very engineering response. That if you show a problem, you better well show a solution or means to get to a
Yes,
solution.
yes.
If you just
Otherwise, shut
whine
up.
about a problem, yeah, don't come in front of engineers.
Yeah, yeah,
We hate that when you just whine about a problem. So
yeah,
that's a very, but let me ask you this, right? And we were talking about this off air, right? That it is a challenge, right? That because all these stories, DVG said, and as he's writing in his book in 2006, he stopped writing, so there was almost a gap of a little bit of a decade, right? And DVG was writing columns, but he hadn't previously written a book. So as a
no.
publisher, well, kudos to you guys first of all for getting these stories out, and in what went in the backstory, what kind of motivated you that okay, he hasn't written a book, but we know he has a book in him.
So that was the, you can say, no, that was a challenge. When, when Dimple ji reached out to us, she said that, that website has stopped in 2006. And since that, that has not been updated. And that had, I think, over 50,000 followers on
Yeah.
that particular website, which,
Hmm.
for us definitely was a potential, buyers, or you can say, for the book.
Yeah.
So that was something which we also were targeting,
Hmm.
uh, but then we thought that okay, there is a gap of say around 15 years, but still all those stories, if you say even DBJ stopped in 2006, but uh, those stories were still relevant,
Hmm.
and those two stories, those cause was still very much, you can say, a concern, or very much, can say that, people can relate with.
Hmm. 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 Absolutely.
So yeah, so
So
that
you're
was.
saying essentially that even though they might be stories of a couple of decades old, the idea behind the story somewhere sometimes still is going on, and people today also might be able to relate even more so maybe than they were
Yeah.
back in the day.
Exactly, like DVG has briefed about that Bishnoiji's story.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, in fact, DVG's himself. I mean, his story. Whether it is,
Hmm.
I mean, bringing change on environment or the
Yeah.
water. All those. I think they are more relevant in today's time.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And yeah, so I think that was that's why I said, after reading all those stories, we thought that this is the time. I think this is the most
Hmm.
appropriate time, you can say, when
Hmm.
this book should come out. It's just that, this has potential to reach out to as many people as possible, and especially we wanted this book to take it to school,
Yeah.
especially.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Chapters,
because
like stories within
yeah,
stories. That is the first perspective I got, and I am
yeah,
hoping that so many educational institutions go. And as I always say, right, I think sometimes we reduce ourselves also in thinking that okay, this is only for Indians, but
yeah,
there are so many people, Indians outside of. There are so many non-Indians talking about issues in India. Where they
yeah.
talk about organizations and stuff like that. Well, here are things that are actually being done and inspirational stories, so they could actually find out how to contribute to that rather than one activist who comes here and just shouts saying give me money, I'll go and fix things in India.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So DVG, I want to come to another specific story that I have. And Praveenji, I'll come to you right after this story with another follow-up question I have to that. But um, so I'm going to take out a couple of stories, and our viewers,
Yeah,
pardon me if
please.
I'm taking my phone out because that's where I've put all my notes these days. Everything is
Yes,
virtual,
please.
so all my notes are all on the phone as well. And there are so many stories, so I had put in specific notes. So couple of things where there was a story about the Jaipur, about the army truck driver finding his mission in the village. You had the story of Komal Kothari. You had the story of Rajendra Singh and the river. So it's one interesting thing that sort of connected to me is there are stories from all across India, right? And
Yeah.
there are so sometimes what happens is in India with multiple languages, multiple cultures, multiple ethnicities, we almost activists too, we get bracketed into talking about just one region or the language that we are more comfortable with, the India that we are more comfortable with, as I would joke, right? But you've not done that in this book. You've actually talked about stories transcending beyond the language barrier, right? Beyond the
Yeah.
geographic barrier. So how did you manage to do that? Was that a conscious effort, or unconsciously did you just stumble across all these stories?
Yeah, but I had one positive dictum. I
Hmm.
would write about anyone who added to India as a civilization, added
Hmm.
value to
Hmm.
India as a civilization. It can be anything. I imagine you are an engineer, and I'm sure Praveen can understand what I'm talking about. I think of India as a giant flywheel, a huge flywheel. It's a 2,200-mile long diameter flywheel, and
Yeah.
every Indian has given it a push.
Yeah.
And it has gained such a momentum over centuries that it's unstoppable. I call it the unstoppable flywheel, you see. And every little push helps. And anyone who has given a push to that
Hmm.
flywheel is a
Mhm.
candidate for me. He has
Yeah.
done something, gone out. And the other thing that I found was I early distinguished between the whiners and the doers, you see.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
chaps would, oh, why is this terrible wrong? I get angry when people talk about that. You know, I said it's angry, but then you got to do something. I mean, I'm not asking you to go and clean the street, but at least don't litter it, that kind of a thing.
Anger is
So
fine
I
as long as
thought,
you channelize it.
yeah, I mean, you do. You see, all my heroes,
Yeah.
or there's one thing that's common in my heroes, they went beyond naming the problem.
Hmm.
And they went and did something about the problem. I'm not
Hmm.
saying that they changed the world, changed the thing. As far as they are concerned, they drew their contentment in doing something about it. So I take
Yeah.
the example that you lifted, I mean, just now, Komal Koratari, Rajendra Singh.
Yeah.
Rajendra Singh and Lakshman Singh, these were the two, they came from well-to-do families,
Hmm.
and the
Hmm.
parents got them a good job in the government, their clerical jobs. You know,
Hmm.
once you get a clerical job in the government, you wait to retire. No, nobody can sack you. So these two
Then it's
guys
only
said,
pension on the mind.
yeah, these two guys said there's something else that we need to do. And
Yeah.
they didn't know what to do, something
Hmm.
for India. So they wanted to decide to run away from home. And this is a very
Hmm.
short thing that I'll share. It's part of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So they stole money from home or somewhere. They got the money from home and they went to the railway station and give us a ticket to the farthest village that this train will go, that this money can buy.
Hmm.
So they just got there and they
Incredible.
got to a place in somewhere in Rajasthan that ran out of money. These two guys get down on the platform and go to that village. And they said, we want to do something for your village. The villagers
Yeah.
looked at them, calm down and go and sit down somewhere. They
Yeah.
probably said, don't come and mess with it. These two lost kids from the city, they're going
Yeah.
to waste our time. So
Yeah.
that's how they went. That is that
Yeah.
urge. So it is that urge that draws me to that person, you know.
Yeah.
Komal Kotari used to be fascinated by the Manganya singing in Jaisalmer.
Yeah.
And when he wanted to record, a funny thing happened to him. When he
Yeah.
found a man who was singing, he had got a grant from some German person, a French person, to record
Hmm.
this music, you know, Manganya's music, which has
Hmm.
become so
Hmm.
famous now.
Hmm.
I'm fascinated by it. I don't understand Hindi as well
Yeah. Yeah.
as I should, but I'm a Tamil. I understand Tamil. But the lilt, the desert song. So when he went to record that music, That fellow said yes. He came home, and then
Yeah.
he had a big Grundig, the reel-to-reel tape recorder in those days. When he was setting it up, he had to go and get something from inside the room. So the Manganier guy was sitting there in the front veranda. When he went inside and came back, this guy was gone. He was not there. This Manganier was not gone. He looked out and he saw him running. The two of them, the two Manganiers, they were running. So he went and caught up with them and stopped them and asked them, what is it? So he says, I just learned that if I sing, this machine will rob my voice forever.
Wow.
So I don't want to lose my voice. I will not sing. So these are the beautiful people. He was creating art and he did not want it to be known. You see, he sang for his masters. The story is there used to be families. They used to entrust his Manganiers to keep the family history. So that the families, they used to narrate the families, I'm sure with exaggeration. They used to narrate the stories. But these are the people. All of them had this. Komal Kothari overcame that block. He persuaded him. And he says, this must be known to the world. So he put him on the world stage. Festival of India took the Manganiers to the world. Today they are big stars. Anyway, that is the typical.
No, but
Have I
you
answered
said
your question?
no, absolutely you did. But I was going to actually say that you actually inadvertently also answered my first question that I was saying, that you said that you do not know Hindi that well as you are from Tamil, and here you are writing about this beautiful folk story about Rajasthan. Both the stories you just talked about had roots in Rajasthan, and I am familiar with that music because growing up in Gujarat, we went to Rajasthan quite often, and are very so absolutely, this is fantastic. But Praveen was trying to make a point, and I'm going to ask him a question after that. You were just trying to say something when he was saying, yeah, go ahead.
DBT was saying something, right? Or you asking
No,
me?
no, I was going to come to you about this. So that he said that he had 100 stories, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you published 25. Are we looking for maybe in the future maybe looking at covering different stories or 25 more from the other remaining ones?
Yeah, definitely, Aditji. That's why I said, I mean, all these stories, if you see, I mean, I think all those 100 stories are very, I mean, all are fascinating stories. And out of which it was, I think, I'm sure it must be very difficult for DVG to select only 25 out of it.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the rest of the stories, and that's why, our objective is to make this volume a successful one. If this COVID thing would have not been there, and school must be very much must be running, then I think this book would have gone into not because I think overall, if you see for the book, not only for the book trade, I think for each and every trade is affected because of this pandemic.
Absolutely.
And once your first volume is successful, that I mean automatically drives you to
Has a
bring
propel
out.
effect.
Yeah, for the second, you can say that, okay, yes, this first. So that's what our objective would be, to first of all establish this first volume and see, I mean, if we can bring out the second with another 25 successful or the next best stories in those 100 stories which DVG has in his schedule.
Yeah, and who knows, there are stories going around right now. Like I always say that it's a work in progress, right? These stories are there. Who knows what might have updated after that in those stories as well.
I just want to come in on that.
Please
See,
go ahead.
I stopped publishing in 2006. And then I took to this environmental restoration, which gave me very little time. But my fan mail never stopped. They kept writing to me, why did you stop those stories? They used to implore me. They said, we are waiting for it. Even today, I meet people in parties and say, would you be the D V Sridharan who wrote Good News India? We used to wait for your stories to come out. So then I thought that I had settled my succession issues at my project, an environmental project, and I took a break. And then I went out and 2012, And I mean, after about 4 years, I went
mm,
back and I did three more stories.
mm,
I
mm,
did
mm, mm,
because I somehow missed writing those good stories. I hope I'm only
mm.
79 now, so I don't write myself off.
No,
So who
you,
knows? I might resume writing. I want to share one little thing.
yes,
This
yes,
is not
yes.
directly here, but just yesterday I was touched by a wonderful story that I saw on Twitter. There's a young lady called Radha Bhardwaj who has
Yes.
produced a film called Space Mom, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, absolutely.
Space
Good.
Moms. And that is, I wrote to her immediately.
Yeah,
If I was writing good news, publishing Good News India, you would be my hero. You know, you managed to spot that wonderful vein of India, which there's such goodness in it. You
yeah,
know, without even seeing that movie, you saw the people who launched our rockets. These
yeah,
are not the people who will be seen in car market and
yeah.
five-star hotels. They're all putting their living together. And these are the people who really are driving India. These are my Indians, you know. So that's why good news is happening all across us in
Yeah.
India for those who would care to look. But the trouble is,
Mm.
the media is not specializing in trash news, trashing, you see.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think the Good News India, I still own the domain name.
yeah,
Goodnewsindia.com is
yeah.
owned by me. Although Doordarshan uses that name without permission, but I'm very happy. They're producing some good stories.
Yeah.
But I, if I may say so, and it has been endorsed by quite a few people, I think I pioneered the genre of good news in
Mm,
India, you know,
mm,
in media. A lot of
absolutely.
magazines followed that. BBC covered it. They used to have a click program. I
Right.
think they made a 2 minutes mention, and quite a lot of American magazines they published it. And one person said, "Thanks to you, I'm starting a Good News America now." Somebody
Wow.
started Good News Sweden. So this became a kind of a thing. There is a huge longing and a market for good news, you know. People
So,
want to, I mean, not exaggerated, not made up. It's got to be
yeah.
genuine, you see.
Genuine, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and as we get into the closing segment of this discussion, I have to say, so Radha is a good friend, and we have featured her on Mind Podcast before,
Oh,
and I actually just spoke to her.
tell her that I admire her for that.
I will. I will.
Oh,
I just spoke to her yesterday about something we're
yeah,
planning around, and
yeah,
we will, for all our listeners, we'll actually do an interactive podcast with Radha and David on Space
oh,
Moms as well in going forward.
yeah. And tell her
So
that I mentioned it in the
yeah.
show. Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, and all our listeners thinking we planned it, we actually did not plan it. DVG
No,
just brought
no,
up Radha's name
yeah,
just like that.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, so but it just happens to be a connect there too. So
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm
no,
always looking.
yeah, at Mind Makers we like to talk. So what is the one interesting thing about being 10,000 miles away from India is trying to have this overview of India in Indic positive is what we try to portray. Yes, we also talk about the current affairs, politics, news in India, but part of us also wants to talk about what is happening on the other side. And before I come into you, DVG Pravinji, I want to ask you something. One interesting thing that I have seen, quite a bit of demand on Kindle and so forth, right? So, are we also going to see physical copies of the books outside of India, or maybe not yet? Or that are we
Yes.
going to see
No.
majorly in India? Yeah,
Yes. No. I mean, it will be available in .com, Amazon.com,
yeah,
.co.uk,
yeah,
because online is definitely something. It would be difficult for us to make it available at physical stores in the US and the UK
yeah,
because you know the
absolutely.
challenges. But
Hmm.
it will be available on .com and .co.uk
Dot co.
along with
Dot
the
uk.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
along with the Goodreads and all those other
yes,
sort of
yes.
thing, right? Yeah.
But
So
A lot of
in
people
fact,
asking for physical copies. Yeah, a
yeah,
lot of
yeah,
my friends are waiting for their physical copies. Yeah.
yeah,
sure,
yeah.
sure, sure. So
So
that will be available for sure.
yeah, maybe that's something, maybe they hopefully in the days to come or something we can look, talk about that. But one interesting thing, DVG, that going a little forward from basically other stories. One interesting thing was Umendra Dutt's mission on natural farming,
Yeah, yeah.
and another one, basically, Mangroves in Kerala. How those two stories were
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
may I take a moment and talk about the
please, please.
relevance of Umendra Dutt's thing? Say,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
spent 6 days in Punjab. I stayed with him,
Hmm.
and he typifies my Good News India story.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, I saw in Punjab the first thing I saw as he
Hmm.
was driving around. It's a flat country. And they
Hmm.
were driving around. I saw these
Hmm.
big blue boxes,
Yeah.
like factories. So I asked Umendra ji, what are these? He says there's a reverse osmosis freshwater plants.
Hmm.
That rang a bell.
Hmm.
Punjab, the land of rivers, you need reverse osmosis for drinking water? Haman, this is shocking.
Hmm.
Then he told me there is a train that leaves Batinda station from platform number 8 every
Hmm.
day,
Hmm.
and it goes to Bikaner, and it's called the Cancer Express, and
Hmm.
it's loaded with sturdy Punjab farmers felled by
Hmm.
the poisonous chemical farming that Punjab gotten used to.
Hmm.
And they were selling the land and going away. So this is the bad side of the story, like I wrote in my story. So what are the good news in this? The good news is
Hmm.
Umendra Datta.
Hmm.
When
Hmm.
everybody is talking about what's going wrong with Punjab, and let me tell you, you've been hearing about riots and protests and all that. I saw this 10 years ago. I mean, I didn't know that it's going to develop into this. I'm not that kind of
Hmm.
a forecast. But I knew Punjab was coming apart. It is
Hmm.
no longer agricultural place. It is just being mined for money with
Hmm.
chemicals. Like somebody said, modern agriculture is using petroleum to produce food. You see,
Hmm.
that's what modern agriculture has become. Punjab has gone so far out on the limb that for
Hmm.
them to
Hmm.
come back is very hard. But my
Hmm.
hero, Umender Dutt,
Hmm.
it's such a hard job. You would go
Hmm.
village to village to village and
Hmm.
preach vegetable growing. It says, grow for yourself,
Yeah.
eat proper food, and then grow for some. And then he was converting people. So that's a kind of a good news hero, typically.
Yeah.
And mangroves again, it is a lost fight. The land sharks that bottom over the land,
Yeah.
converting into this, what you call artificial fish
Hmm.
farming kind
Hmm.
of thing.
Hmm.
And the mangroves were getting destroyed. These people, a college teacher and the students, fought and started restoring the mangroves. Mangroves are fighting back. So these are
Absolutely.
wonderful stories. These are things that are still happening in all over India. I'm confident.
Absolutely. So, in closure, Praveenji, any closing comments you have before I go to DVG for the last word? Guys, I know I wish I could talk about all 25 on the podcast, but given the
No,
45
no.
minutes to 1 hour slot we tried to cover 6 or 7 of them. And, I'll try to end with one. But, Praveenji, any closing words before I go to DVG for the last word?
I think Aditji, now I wish just now, if all these things, this COVID thing gets over, we want this book to promote as aggressively as possible, and
Hmm.
we are already in talks with Dimple ji, and
Hmm.
we are going to. We are very confident that this book will get very good publicity. Apart
Hmm.
from what all the kind of effort which you are putting, and I mean Dimple ji is also putting her best. I'm very positive that we had an initial discussion with our publicity guy, and we are very positive that even the Indian print media will be very much interested in showcasing the positive stories or the positive, I mean, some interesting excerpts of this book into
Yeah.
their, yeah. So that is something if, that is, I mean, as I said that, we are very positive, and if that goes as per the plan, we
Hmm.
may see this book becoming definitely a change. I mean, this because bestseller, it will be it would not be correct on my part to say that we want to make this book a bestseller. If we can, this book can bring change. As
Yeah.
this book, I mean, his
Yeah.
stories has brought changes to several lives. If this
Hmm.
book additionally can reach out to those people who has not read or reached out to DBG's website, and
Hmm.
they can read this book and bring change into their lives. I think, I mean, our objective will be achieved.
See, taking a lot of liberties from both of you, I want to add one line to that, and I want to come to DVG for closing comments. That most books are people. The intention is to read and inform, maybe to read and entertain. But I would add one line to here is also to read and inspire. Because
Yes.
what is the use of information that you're reading if you don't get inspired by it and do something for yourself and write to TVG about it, write to someone else about it, right? Like one thing I want to change also, this is maybe is an attitudinal problem. Like my dad and I, we always discuss about this, that in India we generally don't tend to publicize a lot of social work or good stories that we do, like probably they're done in the West. In the West, the concept is that if you donate to a charity that you like, you actually tweet about it, you post about it, so that you inspire 1,000 others to write. Right. And in India, it's the other way, that a lot of people actually do silent donations, or they don't want to do. But sometimes I agree with the sentiment behind it, that you don't want the stories to be, but sometimes just telling them, or even if you don't want to tell them, writing to someone like DVG and telling them about this story, and him including in your book, helps a lot of people as well. So with that, DVG, any closing comments, and any one other story that you want to talk about, briefly?
I won't, rather than that, because the time is limited. I
Yeah.
would say what I got from my Good News India adventure,
Hmm.
in addition to meeting all those people that I met and who inspired me and gave me a direction which I am now following with environmental restoration, it gave
Hmm.
me validation as a writer. I
Hmm.
mean, I was not edited by anybody. I wrote and then I published, and it was always good for me to get the feedback saying, we love your stories, that kind of a thing. So it gave me validation as a writer.
Hmm.
It gave me a validation of the website was created by me. At that time, there was no webmaster. I didn't have too much
Hmm.
money. I
Hmm.
designed the website. I used to take the
Hmm.
pictures. It cost me
Hmm.
33,000 rupees for a 6 megapixel Kodak Easy Share camera. That hurt me, that money. So I used to take those pictures. I used to bring
Yeah.
them. And in those days, there was no, the word blog was not invented.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I created a website. I taught myself HTML, and then I set it up. And then I set up a better one with a website. I taught myself to do it. It gave me that. And
Yeah.
then it taught me to all those, made me meet all those people. So there are so many readers. I feel so happy when they write to me saying that I'm so glad I met up with you. They come and see me, even now.
Yeah.
And finally, it gave me a purpose in life. And
Yeah.
above all, the most grateful thing that I was a person who had gone so far away from India. Our merchant navy training was so secular. We all enjoyed being mistaken for Europeans.
Hmm.
English language was the only one that was allowed in the college hostel verandas. You can speak in
Yeah.
your mother tongue in your rooms, but you cannot speak it in verandas. So I had gone so far away. Good News India made me fall incurably in love with this land, India.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm a
Hmm.
hopeless romantic when it comes to it, and that makes me terribly, terribly angry when somebody rubbishes it. So
Hmm.
Dimple has asked me to hold my temper. You don't do it because you're supposed to be promoting the book. But
Huh.
I'm holding my temper when people rubbish it unfairly, wherever there's a fake
Right.
news going on about this terrible thing. The real good things about India you criticize. I mean, real nasty things about India you criticize. You don't rubbish India, and I won't keep quiet. I'm an angry man, and old men have that privilege and things like that. But I'm incurably in love with these people.
Yeah.
How did we
Yeah.
carry on, come on through this millennia if they had not kept that big flywheel going? You know,
Yes.
they kept it going. I'm grateful for every single person. I studied at 110 rupees government fees for boarding and lodging and training with a job assured. Who paid for it? The farmers paid for it. Man
Yeah.
who mined salt and sold it, he paid for it.
Yeah.
And that was the time of India being poor. So
Yeah.
if you don't have a sense of gratitude for the salt you ate, I have no respect for that man. I have no respect for that man.
I mean, it is a fascinating point, right? Like, what
Just tell you,
is the?
I'll finish with
No,
one
no.
line.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely. No,
just
no.
one
Go for it.
line. If you want to rubbish India, do it. Sitting in India, living your plush life in India, do it. But at least have the grace to import your salt.
I think DVG, the best
Yeah.
part with this book is, that each and every story has that wow moment. Each and
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
story has that wow moment. When
Yeah.
you end the story, you feel like wow. So I think
Yeah.
that is something. If
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah. So
And what is a book about India if it doesn't make you laugh and cry at every 5 minutes of it, right? Because that
Yep.
is
Like
India.
our movies. Like our
It's a movie,
movies.
or it's a land of million emotions. If it's a land of
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
languages, it's a
Absolutely.
land of
Absolutely.
million emotions. And
You
you
know.
cannot be emotional about India and not be emotional about Indians who have made India what it is today. And sometimes we always joke, like, we work with our differences. Sometimes I say we work because of our differences, and we work in spite of our differences also, because in some cases
Yeah.
the differences help us view different perspectives about India in a different lens, and we somehow find a way to make India as an entity work because in spite of them. So that is
Yeah, I think it's
so,
some other many other people don't are not justified in even smiling, and they smile. They have no justification for the smile, and they have the
no,
smile. The Indians
absolutely.
breaks
That
my
that
heart.
no,
Breaks my
but
heart.
that smile, that smile is what lights 1,000 lamps everywhere. So, but thank you, DVG, for this wonderful book, and thank you, Praveenji, for publishing this book. I am hoping that this is not the end of the 25 stories. I hope there are more to these 25 stories, and there
Okay.
are 25 more or 250 more from where these are coming from.
From so
And
many others doing it. Yeah.
so many others, and maybe DVG, we in the next maybe in the weeks to come, we might have a follow-up session with actually a couple of people, writing to us about the stories, or with our listeners asking asking questions about it, because a
Oh, I
lot
would
of
love it.
yeah, because a lot of people, readers, have read the book, and they might want to interact or talk to you directly or ask you questions directly, and
Thank
mind
you.
makers would love to be a facilitator for that.
So I'll just leave them a caution. This man is 79 years old,
Huh.
and old men, if you ask them to start talking, they don't stop. So
Trust
so
me, if that is what it takes for them to listen to you and pay attention to these stories, let's do it.
thank you.
No,
I'm game. Yeah, I'm
uh,
game.
so but our
So
recommendation this but our recommend
please make sure that the younger generation of Indians read it and feel better
absolutely.
about India and just promote it among the younger people. They are the ones who
we
require direction. They are the ones who are getting lost and confused by the terrible narratives that are flying around today. And they should be made to read. So do all that you can. And Praveen ji and Adit ji, I missed the
Arey
G
nahi,
throughout. It doesn't come
just
easily to a
Aditi.
South
No,
Indian.
no, no. I am more of Adit, Praveen, and DVG more as
Yeah,
well. So
all
please
right.
call me Adit. Don't call me
So
Adit ji, sir.
thank you for hosting me on the show, and I enjoyed talking to you. And I look
Absolutely,
forward to talking to readers who read the book
absolutely.
or anything about India. They want to meet an
Yeah.
incurable romantic about India. I am free to talk to them.
That makes it three of us. But please do like, subscribe, guys. Follow us on Twitter, like us. Check out the books that Praveenji and all are publishing, and check out DVG's book and his Twitter feed at Straws in the Wind, and see, write to him about it. With that, thank you guys for tuning into this episode of Mind Podcast. We'll be back with more stories, more India positive stories, more good news stories about India in the weeks to come. Thank you so much.
Thank
thank you,
you.
Adi.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you, DVJ.